Well, thank you for everyone that came today to the frequently asked questions for restorative practices in schools. This is a fun drop-in session for our RJWorld 2022 conference. And today we have three of us here humbly as a part of the panel, but we'd love to hear more from those of you that have joined. We're all going to introduce ourselves. This session was sort of my idea, and I invited two of my favorite people. So that's how this happened. I invited my old friend, Eric Butler from California, who taught me much of what I know about restorative justice and restorative practices. And I invited Michelle Stowe because I've followed her work and I regularly show her TED Talk when I give trainings. And so I'm a big fan of both of these people. So it's such an honor that Michelle and Eric joined me today to just answer some really typical questions. So we have questions that were sent in to us from a lot of people. Plus, we have some, just experience things that we knew get asked of us a lot as restorative practices trainers. And so we're going to be working through those today. And then those of you that are with us are also welcome to either in the chat put questions. That's probably the best setup. And we are recording, and then we will get this posted for everyone. Does that sound all right? If you have any questions, drop it in the chat. Eric, good. Okay, so let's take a quick minute and let's just each introduce ourselves. I can start if that's all right. So I'm Laura Mooiman. Funny spelling, but it's Dutch, and I married into it. And it's where I live now. So I moved to the Netherlands about 3 years ago from California. And there I was working about 10 years as a school district administrator in Napa, running restorative justice programs and PBIS and well-being, student wellness programs, opening wellness centers. And before that, I was a school social worker for a long time. I worked for LA Unified. I worked in Colorado for a while. I've worked in probation as a social worker. I've worked in child protective services. I've done some private practice. County mental health. I used to work for the child crisis unit where we get called out to evaluate kids for suicidality and homicidality. So I'm an LCSW. I'm kind of coming at restorative practices as a mental health professional, really. And it really resonated with me the first time that I ever experienced it after running groups. It's, a rather therapeutic process, actually. And I learned a lot of what I know from Eric Butler, who I actually hired. I brought into my school district for a few years to do trainings, and I just sat and experienced and listened a lot and went with him into some really hard kind of conversations, some pretty intense situations. And we can drop some of those talk about some of those things that we did together too. So right now, the last 3 years, I've been traveling, working with schools all over the world who are interested in implementing restorative practices. And kind of my specialty is blending restorative practices with PBIS because I've done both of those things. So I work with international schools and a lot of work in the US as well. All right, Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
All
And
right.
then we go to Michelle. Okay.
Um, so I'm Eric Butler. I was the first full-time restorative justice hire in a school in the United States. I'm originally from New Orleans. So I was in Hurricane Katrina. I was one of those folks on the roof. And I moved to Oakland because of them. At that time, I wasn't really as vulnerable as I am now. I had to learn that through restorative justice. So I wouldn't ask for help. But what I would do is just hang out by what was this place? I used to work there, Catholic Charities. And I'm not Catholic, but I would hang there because that's where the Hurricane Katrina survivors were getting help. So I would hang out there so I could just be a part of the community that I was used to. But I would never ask for help, and I wouldn't take the help that they were trying to offer. So one day, I think that if I had a talent, I was able to convey the pain of the pain of Hurricane Katrina. And so people started listening to my story. And one of the bosses at Catholic Charities hired me to do this thing called crisis response. And crisis response was a program where we would show up to the scene of a murder and assess who was mostly affected by that murder. And we would offer them mental health services and sometimes financial help. And as you can imagine, the funding ran out almost immediately. But I was able to make a huge impact because I was seeing a lot of the policemen telling the families of victims that their loved ones had passed away in a really insensitive way. And I brought it up in the meeting one day, and they said, like, well, then why don't you do it? And I'm pretty sure it was illegal because I didn't have any training, but I did think that I could do a much better job than they did. So I did that for a while. And Fanya Davis heard about me, and she summoned me to her office. And when Fanya Davis tells you to move, you kind of move. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know her history. I didn't know that she was Angela Davis' sister. I just knew that the people that told me that I needed to go see Fanya Davis said, you gotta go and see her. She's gonna hunt you down. So like I went to see her, she hired me immediately, and we started doing great work. The school that I landed, it was a few schools before. Wait, we back up a little bit. In crisis response, what we found out that the people that was mostly affected were the kids that lived in the community. So I found myself doing circles at those schools in those communities before I knew how to do circles. So a lot of those circles were horrible, which helped me understand how to make them better. So after that job, I got hired by Fanya, and it was a year of like bad practices first, and then I had to understand that restorative justice didn't work, and restorative justice does not work. Restorative justice works as much as the tennis shoes I have on can make me jump high. If we don't put in the work as a community, restorative justice is just something that we say. In fact, those two words don't make any sense together. So I had to learn what restorative justice was before I can learn how to implement it in schools. And once that happened, we eliminated suspensions for about 10 years in a row. And because of that, the rate of graduations went up 100%. So I'd never say that restorative justice worked. The people made restorative justice work. And what I'm doing right now is teaching people the model that I didn't invent anything. I think that we've always had this stuff inside of us. And in fact, every time I do a training, there's a teacher that always says, I've been doing this forever. I just didn't have a word for it. And personally, I don't care what you call it, just do the work. And so now I'm doing trainings all around the country. And I've been outside of the country too, to do this work, to Canada. That's the furthest I've been. So in Canada, it's kind of like Detroit.
All right. Michelle, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So Michelle Stowe is my name. Yeah, I'm a teacher at heart. So I think I teach people about restorative practice. That's how I think about it. I guess I came into this work because I was so passionate about it myself and my own practice. Like you're saying there, Eric, you know, where you get trained, you find, oh, there's words and there's actually a framework or a compass for this, you know. And sure, look, I'm still learning. I'm learning all the time. I learn in the schools I get the privilege to get to work with. I guess most of the time, I work with schools that want to go on that whole school approach, you know, as opposed to something tokenistic. Or I guess what I'm passionate about is moving conversations beyond the idea of RP and behavior, you know, and thinking it's about behavior management because I think for the culture change, it's really understanding the philosophy and seeking to live it as best we can. And that's the paradigm shift, you know, which is hard. And I still grapple myself. I don't know, have all the answers, that's for sure. But I love learning with other schools I get to work with, and we work together. We're finding our way. So I'm learning all the time myself on that journey. And, you know, I just think of it as a privilege. I never planned, I loved being a teacher, you know, I really did. I love my job. Sometimes I'm lonelier in this job than I was in my old one, because I talk about relationships all day, but I'm not in them the way I used to be. But I guess when I think about restorative practice in schools, what I'm very passionate about is bringing it into the everyday teaching and learning, relational pedagogy, relational thinking, not just the formal practices that we're adding on the top, you know. And I guess that foundational work is where I guess I'm passionate about, and that's kind of what I spend most of my time and energy in supporting schools with those implementation pathways. I used to do a lot of training, a one and done. You'd see me once a year, or when Michelle comes in, we'll do the RP, you know. And I knew that wasn't creating change, you know, that I want to be part of. So now I'm much more discerning. I work with a much smaller community of schools, but in a much deeper way, and it's lovely, you know. And like I said, delighted to be here today, learning from the rich experiences between obviously your Laura and Eric, but also I know all the wealth and wisdom in the background there of the souls and the spirits that have joined us here today. So look forward to our session today.
All right, thanks. So let's just dive into some of these questions. So I have a long list of questions, and I'm wondering what's the most common. I mean, these are all really common. So let's start with one of the first ones we get, and Eric, you alluded to it. Does restorative practices really work?
No.
People
work. The idea of restorative justice is just an idea. And it sounds good in theory. But if you don't actually put the work in, it's just like any other thing. I think first you must define restorative justice. And like I said before, those two words doesn't make any sense together unless you discover what justice is. And justice isn't a thing that you can go to. Justice is already inside of you. The way I define justice is having the freedom to exercise your values. So like, if you think about it, anytime you've actually seen justice, it's been in a place where it has nothing to do with the law. So sometimes you can be just and lawless, but still just. So once I define that term of justice for myself, I know that what we're restoring is the justice inside of ourselves. Those moments when we say, now I can't do that because I might get in trouble, or I might feel shamed if I do that, we're restoring that thing by and the way we do that is talking about our values, like, and what these values mean to us. The thing that we have in common isn't our experiences, and that's what makes it so hard for us to communicate with each other, especially across racial boundaries. The thing that we do share is our values. We all love. We all want empathy for ourselves, even if we don't give it to others. So we have that in common. We all like truth telling, even if we don't want to tell the truth. We want the truth to be told to us. So like, we all have those values in common.
Yeah.
And if you think about some of the most some of the things that have, think about some of the times you've seen justice, it's often been after you see it, somebody gets in trouble. Martin Luther King was justice, but he also went to jail for doing everything that he said that he was going to do that was just. In fact, I've been fired from high schools for giving hugs, and the reason why is because that's off limits. But to me, restorative justice, the word means the definition of restorative justice is finding out what our common values are and how do we use those values to get the things that we need from our community. And sometimes a hug is the thing that's needed.
I like that. That's beautiful. I know, Michelle, you addressed this question in your TED Talk, and honestly, yours is the answer I honestly regularly use when people ask me. So why don't you share kind of your thinking about does restorative practices really work?
Yeah, I guess it's something that I think about a lot myself, and it's a question that comes up. I think it's when I think about that question, I think of it in terms of how do we define success, you know? So does it work or not work? How are we defining success? And the challenge is that so often in schools, people are defining success with conformity. They did what I said, you
Mm-hmm.
know, or they agreed, and it's kind of alluding to what you were talking about earlier on, Eric, about the hierarchy, you know, that people are just using RP to kind of reinforce these structures as long as they work for us.
Yeah.
And trying to dismantle that, I guess, is part of it's hard and it's difficult. But when I think about success, I think did I like who I was? For me personally, right, in my practice, who did I want to be in that situation? Back to the values, you know, was I who I wanted to be? Did I model how I hope someone might reflect back? You know, it's not about whether he or she did what I said, you know. And so that's how I think about it. And I think I love what you were saying there, Eric, as well, about the values often in a staff room. You know, there might be a mixed a mixed kind of the word is gone, but there might be people want different things. Some people are at zero tolerance, right? No, the kid didn't do what we said, so you know, the 3 strikes and you're out, Jobby. And someone else might be very passionate about a restorative approach. But usually what we have in common is that we want our kids to flourish and be well. You know, usually we have the same intention. We think of a different pathway. And what, like Eric said, what I find unifies conversations is when we chat about our values. You know, and then of course, RP is when we have values and actions and they match. If our value is empathy, connection, community, love, care, kindness, which it often is in a school, how are our practices breathing life into that, you know? And I think that's when people can really open up more to that commitment to that restorative approach, that it's not that the kid did or didn't do what I said. But of course, I think it's, for me personally, say, who do I want to be in that situation? Are we modeling our values? Are we honoring relationships? And again, it doesn't mean that relationships are we're happy and skipping and holding hands, but there's the potential there to connect and putting our energy in that direction. And I think that's what that's what I try and think about when I think about success, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Laura?
I think I often say in short, and it's from your video, Michelle, is it maximizes the potential for that.
Yeah.
That's often what I say to people, because we just have to. And I mean, I have some folks that'll ask, you know, well, is this just putting me at the same level as the kid? Is this
Please, God.
just, yeah? Have you heard that one? Yeah, like, oh, I'm going to lose my authority in the class and that kind of thing. And maybe this is kind of a bird walk to that, but they don't need to worry about that, right? The stepping into the hall and having that conversation is allowing yourself to have that humanity back. And
Yeah.
you know, like I had one teacher, this is pretty rare. I was in a webinar in a school district in Southern California, and this teacher was she said, this is really unusual. Yeah, so I was in class, high school teacher, and the student was, you know, cussing at me and used the F word and, you know, F you, Miss Blank. And so I just asked him to step into the hall and I said, hey man, you seem like you're having a bad day. And then the kid like starts crying and starts telling, or I don't know about crying, but starts getting emotional. My girlfriend's having an abortion. And this whole thing comes out, you know? And I was just astonished. This person had been teaching for like 3 years. But I think she has enough of this happening in her class that she's just like, it's an amazing, and talk about like a practice, you know, restorative practices that she's had. And not everybody can do that, obviously. And so I feel like restorative practices gives us a framework to get us there. When we're not naturally going to be able to calm ourselves down in a difficult situation, we calm down, and then but it gives you questions and a you know, step into the hall routine and some practice at that. So it maximizes the potential of being able to be like that superstar teacher. Yeah, it just helps us. I think when some of us are linear, sequential. Tell me what to do first, tell me what to do next, and I can do it. You know, and not everybody is just born that way, like Eric. No, even Eric, you said you changed after Katrina, right? Yeah. So it
Yeah,
is a practice, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why I say no so emphatically is because
Mm,
I know that if I say yes, it does work, you're going to be using a thing
yeah.
whenever you see fit instead of making it a part of your life. And if
Yeah.
you make it a part of your life, it isn't a thing that you're doing. You're doing you. So so you're not doing a thing. And when you're working with teachers and you give them a thing to do, it's just one more thing to do.
Yeah.
And who wants to do one more thing and not get paid for it?
Right. That's true. Well, let's talk about another one. So, Eric, I asked you this. I asked you this question, right? Probably 10 years ago when we met.
I probably have a different answer.
What do you do if students misbehave in a circle? They
Let them.
laugh, they roll their eyes, they refuse, they interrupt. And Michelle, you said the other one. What if they don't engage in a circle? You get that one a lot. So do you want to? Do you want me to tell you what you told me?
Yeah, tell me what I told you.
You said, you said it doesn't happen. And I'm like, well, of course it doesn't happen to you, Eric. Like they're mesmerized when you run a circle. And I have to tell the group here that my first exposure to restorative practices was driving down to Bunch High School in Oakland and sitting in a circle with Eric Butler, who was the restorative justice coordinator at the school, meeting Fania Davis, who did a little presentation for our school district, and got to meet Cameron that day, your friend, and that passed away. He made a big impression on me, absolutely. And yeah, and so in my mind, I was thinking, well, of course that doesn't happen to Eric Butler, but maybe we have more answer than that to for the rest of the group, because I think that would be, there's so many well-meaning teachers that really struggle with
Yeah,
this.
all right. So like before I got into restorative justice, I was a jock. So I thought like a jock.
Yeah, you played for the Colts, right?
Yeah, my conversations weren't like, they were very limited. I didn't talk about my feelings and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk like when they're disrupting the circle, what I do is I let them do it. And the reason why is because, have you ever had lunch with a group of people and y'all are having a great conversation? Then you have to go to another place and have a different conversation that's not as fun as the conversation that you already had. You're probably not even listening. So what I do is I let them, and then I make a deal with them. I was like, listen, we'll do whatever you want to do today, but tomorrow, when we come to circle, can we do my thing? And they usually agree. It's respectful. I am not the circle. I cannot dictate what happens in circle. And it's unfair. And it brings us back to that hierarchy stuff where you have to do what I say do.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be in a community together, it's going to be a little bit of give and take. Our relationship, and I don't have that problem with feeling like my authority is being taken away from me. I desperately want to be in a parallel relationship with the students. And the reason why is because I want them to tell me things that they wouldn't normally tell an adult.
Yeah.
And they won't do it if they think that it's going to be a top-down response to whatever their problem is. But if we have a parallel relationship, and I'm kind of just like you, I can understand why you would want to fight him. But let's talk about why that isn't a good idea.
Yeah. I like it. You let him do it.
Yeah.
And then you negotiate later.
Yeah.
That's
as long as you're not hurting each other.
Yeah.
Or smoking cigarettes in the classroom, like I let them just go crazy, do whatever you want, and I will not allow. And sometimes I will I'll set the whole situation up where I'll have another teacher come inside the classroom and kick them out the classroom. It's all playing, it's all orchestrated. Like just come in the classroom and sit there and talk about how they need to sit down and that kind of like, and then I'm gonna kick you out. And then you come back and you apologize and that kind of, so like we can both have a different type of relationship with the students.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Michelle, what do you say when people ask, what do you do about students misbehaving in a circle?
Yeah, I guess there's lots of things I'm thinking of. I think again, you guys were chatting about those vulnerable spaces, and I think you grow those capacities. I don't think they happen from
Right.
nowhere. So I think, especially back to that relational pedagogy, and like those little low risk shares, this one word quizzes as part of my teaching lesson, learning lessons, linking it in to those low risk, fun, non-threatening ways. I think growing it, I think is important, and also growing as a facilitator too. Loved what Eric, you remind us that it can be so intimidating when the people are thinking, oh my God, I'm in charge of this circle, I have to make this go well. Sure, how could you? And that's a shift again, where it's our circle, it's our group. I guess establishing those agreements at the start, what would help it go well. And again, one of those things is always saying, sure, I can't make it. This is our circle. What do you think? And so I think, like all restorative approaches, if you're in the problem, you're in the solution, So I might invite the group to think, what will we do? How will we fix, what's happening? Or, there's loads of things. I love this quote from Parker Palmer, engaging with soft eyes turn to wonder, right? It's a lovely quote. So I try to engage my own soft eyes, not like, how dare he or she, who are they in this? I'm trying to, what's going on there? It could be like awkward. It could be loads of reasons why perhaps people mightn't, be engaged at that time. I'll tell you where I learned my most. I used to work a bit in prisons, I still volunteer there, not as often as I used to, right? But so they play loads of games as part of this alternative to violence program, loads of games. And in actual fact, the more hostile or tense the environment was, the more the need for games. So you think, I'm not risking a game here, Jesus, but it was the only thing, because words weren't going to do it. So to accelerate connection quickly, we played games and activities that are a bit silly, but you're like, come on. And I guess as the facilitator, you're trying to take the risk first. And then you can see those kind of barriers break down. So that's another thing that I do a lot in circles, is I link games and activities in with the circles to try and shuffle or get the energy and dismantle the rigid, I only sit with you or whatever. So there are a couple of things that I might do practically, but essentially the group, it's our circles. So we try and facilitate it together, and I find that that's helpful,
Right. I think a couple other tips that I've given is, if it's a certain kid or couple, pulling them aside and engaging them and helping you plan the circle for the next day. Like they can ask the questions. I've had fun, like alternative high schools, where they make all the questions, throw it in a hat, and like they come up with crazy fun questions, like, things about afterlife and seeing ghosts. And I mean, they come up with all kinds of really interesting things, and adults don't think of that stuff, So that's really fun. And then the other one I would say is, maybe that's that mental health side, but trying to figure out, what am I missing? What's happening here? That, I had one situation where I had these boys that were, it's like a 6th grade class, and we were on the floor, and I usually can, like, I did the same thing. They were all like, talking and giggling and just crawling behind desks and stuff. And so I started icebreakers, right? I played Where the Wind Blows. I was trying to do a values thing with this, and they are not on board. And the same, like 3 kids, and the rest of them were like begging the group, like with values, like, we just want to pay attention to our teacher, like, and I just, finished up the circle and talked to the teacher later, and it turns out that she said the whole class was fine until we went to outdoor ed, which in California, I guess, in America, that's like the whole class would like go on a weekend trip or a week away camping. They came back and everything was different. So something happened, and so sometimes and I've seen that a lot, and I'm sure you have too, where there's something's not been worked out in this group and they're not safe together. And so that's something that figuring that out, pulling that aside and working on that, I think before bringing the kids back could be helpful. Okay, so all right, let's see. What's another good one that you get, Michelle? I know you have several. We have one sent in. How about I do from Serena? Sent in a question thanking us for this opportunity. She said, what would you suggest to a new practitioner to do first to try to add to school's curriculum a restorative practice lesson? She says, based on your experience, is it more effective to train teachers to use restorative practices in schools or work directly with students? Well, this is interesting. So I think that's that model. And that happened to me in my school district. And this was before Eric, but we hired an agency to come in and provide us a restorative justice coach that would just go do their thing um, behind a closed door. And then, $150,000 later, we hadn't changed. And so I insisted from then on, whenever I sent Eric to a school and whenever I now go to schools, like the administrator had to sit with him. They had to model, they had to learn like with and watch it. And none of this behind closed doors, sending the specialist in to fix it. The kids would come out happy, it would be solved. But that idea of just going in and sending someone to do the restorative work, or do you teach the teachers to do it? So you all want to weigh in on that?
Well, I've had a lot of situations where folks would pay me to come out and do a restorative justice training with students, and I would always give them the heads up, like, that's not a good idea. We should do the restorative justice training with you and do a circle about the training that we just did with the students. Reason why is because the young people don't have any power to make any decisions. The only thing that they have is practice. So they can practice the behavior that they've learned from this 47-year-old man one time, and it's probably going to be impactful, but it's nothing like getting this information for yourself. And I understand that one of the teachers' big takeaways is it's time. So like, I don't have time to sit in a training. Plus, trainings are boring.
Yeah.
Except mine.
And mine and Michelle's. Yeah. So go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, look, when I started to do research in this area when I was a teacher myself, I'll just quickly say I had initially designed this program for students, and I was just going to reiterate it and change it as part of the research. And when I did my reconnaissance, it's like what you were saying, Eric, sure, look, the kids that we were being trained and weren't even getting a chance to use their practices. It was literally like dull. And that's when I realized actually you have to work with the adults here. And I was real nervous about it. I was totally intimidated. The students were much easier to work with. I worked with them all day, every day, and I had like the bloody, the sweats, my voice to be funny, talking to staff, I found it really hard. But that's where change lives. And again, for me, restorative practice isn't something I'm doing. It's not something like I'm doing to students or someone else will do, or I'll do it. It's how I'm thinking. It's how I'm being. It's a philosophy. Yeah. So if we don't begin with that relational thinking, which the adults in the building who are, they're the architectures of that culture, students come and go and parents come and go, and they're a huge part of a restorative community. But to change that relational thinking first, in my experience, it has to be for authentic, sustainable change, And so I guess, I think working with us and our thinking and our ways of being and understanding that it's a philosophy, it's not something I'm doing to anybody else, when they're in trouble. I think that's really important, yeah.
And teachers have to feel their success in order to continue doing anything. So like once you see the success of calling parents and telling parents good things about the students instead of bad things, once you see the flip in that, like, oh, okay. The reason why the parents have never answered my phone calls before is because I'm basically telling them they're a bad parent. Yeah. So now they answer my call because I mix it up. I tell you when the kid's doing good, and the next time if the kid isn't doing so good, it's not that he's doing bad. It's that we need to be closer partners in the education of the kids. So like, I want to be a part of, I want to be your partner. So like, we have to learn more about each other. The moment you realize you've done everything there is to do in restorative justice, you've been doing something else the whole time.
So the follow-up to that I have 3 questions here sent in was, how do you get staff to engage? How do we get buy-in from staff? Or how do you get teachers on board when they really want punishments? So a lot of questions about how then, if we think, what we're all saying here is, yeah, the best approach is to build capacity. Basically, that's what we call it in PBIS world, probably. Build capacity so that restorative is what everyone does. It's all the teachers talk the same. That's that's what we want the kids to think. So how do we get there? How do you do the buy-in? I have 3 questions on that.
Right.
I think you kind of hinted, Eric, like they need to feel some success. It's like one thing I just heard you say. What other thoughts do you all have?
Engagement. Again, like working at Bunch, going in, I knew the teachers that weren't going to be that wasn't going to like me or restorative justice. They knew it too.
Yeah.
So my job was to always be visible. So like you can't get away from it. You can't get away from not building this relationship. I'm going to be so nice that if you, and especially after we talk about values and I realize the thing that you value, I'm going to make my value on that thing a little bit stronger around you and let you notice who I am. Food's a good way to have conversation. So we'll do a potluck, and in no certain order, just the topics that come up, we'll talk about those topics and we'll have fun. We don't even mention restorative justice. We're just adults that happen to work at a place who's trying to find out how can we like each other. And after that, why? Why is it important for us to like each other? And kids mimic our behavior. So in the break room, certain certain staff sit on one side, other staff, and they compete with each other. And kids recognize that. So we try to be the community that we want to see from the kids. And another thing, when leading professional development meetings, talking about like when you were growing up, who was your favorite teacher? All right. Do you do the same things that teacher does? All right. So like, and I can bet you, if we can create an environment where everybody is the school's favorite teacher, our kids would want to be in our classrooms. And that makes sense. Now, in order for that not to make sense, you just have to be just being really, really stubborn. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And let's try it. I love to say, like I said, let's make a deal. Let's try it. And if it doesn't work, let's set a goal. And if we're not successful in a week, we'll do the other thing. We'll suspend everybody. And I don't mean that, but
yeah.
Let's set a goal.
That'll show them. Yeah.
I believe, and the thing is, I believe in the kids. The kids are better than us. So like, I know the kids are gonna win. That's why I'm safe to say, like, let's make a deal. Yeah. It could be about one child. Well, this child is a terror. Okay, let's have a circle about his needs and what does he need.
Yeah.
Does he need to be suspended? Of course not. Now I have to make that make sense. Why doesn't he need to be suspended? Because this is his community. And when we suspend him, we're telling him that he's not welcome in his own community. And what does that mimic? That mimics our system that we say is broken. So we further engage in that system punitively. And it just makes sense. Like we live in a society where if I kill somebody, the state will kill me to prove to everybody else that killing people ain't a good idea. We work in an environment that says, if you don't come to school, if you're truant, we'll suspend you. So like, if you don't come to school, I'm not gonna let you come to school. That doesn't make any sense. And if you can make that make sense, we can do it all day, but you can't make that make sense.
Yeah. Michelle, what do you say to that idea of the getting people on board?
Yeah. Again, linking in, I guess, that idea of, I guess what I heard Eric say a lot is challenging our thinking, our perceptions, being reflective. I learned this one from Dr. Belinda Hopkins, actually, in one of the trainings I did with her. But one of the lovely things I got to do with staff at the start, I might invite them to consider, what they need to give of their best, kind of like what you're saying there, Eric, about in the community, what do we need? I think offering a community, in this context, maybe a group of teachers, a relational experience, not theory, a relational experience that they like. And for example, that's one practical thing that people tend to like to explore, unpack, and think about, right? And again, it's linked to our values. And then what are the observable characteristics of that? How do we live this, you know? And then linking that back in to our classrooms. I think for me, like when I'm thinking about, right, I do a session with a staff, one of my primary focus is how can I make them laugh? How can I make them get to talk, the heart chats? Love those questions, Eric, like that. When you were a kid, or when you were back, or I might even ask them a question like, whose poster would have been on the wall when you were a kid? Have a chat about that, you know, in a small group or whatever. They laugh, they like it. And I'm like, this is a restorative space, right? I'm talking about restorative practice, but we're feeling and being it together. And that's what we're trying to replicate into our classrooms. But we won't know that unless I experience it. I think that's really powerful. And also when we have meetings, right, typically in a hierarchical school, there will be a principal or a deputy principal and maybe 2 or 3 people who might be particularly loud and vocal, and it dominates the whole meeting.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And if we're trying to live that restorative approach, having practices and processes like walking debates, like multiple solution focused circles, concentric circles, loads of different things that we're trying to do as a staff, people like that. People that want zero tolerance if the kid says no to me, like to be heard, like what you said, Eric. We like to, so what I have found to be very beneficial is trying to model it amongst ourselves as best as we can as an entry point into considering the value of this for when we're in our classrooms, you know. And the last thing I'd say is, right, you know, when we think about our kids that might be struggling and we're trying to be generous and think, you know, what's going on for them, whatever. I always think, right, as a teacher, I love being a teacher. Probably spend a lot of my day feeling good or whatever, and I was good at it, right? And if I was able to get the kids to connect with me on my best day, I'd have other days where I didn't, right? But what I'm saying is, if we were able to do that, we would. Like no teacher comes into this job wanting to be screaming their head off or locked into power struggles all day. You know, they're struggling. We're all struggling. I'll have me days where I'll struggle, you know, and I try and think restoratively about one another as well. Like they're not baddies or goodies, you know. What are our needs? And often our need is like that, to be heard, you know, to have empathy for, look, I'm doing my best. This kid is bloody driving me mad. I don't know what else to do, you know. So trying to live it and think about it is that amongst each other, I think is probably the biggest way to build the capacity. And the invitations that Eric said, you know, would you give it a try? Do you fancy it? And again, this is something that I used to do in my school a lot. And people say, will you do a circle for me? No, I do them with you. Or would you give this one a try? Sure, how's what you're doing currently working? This is an option. And maybe it's not for you, that's okay. But if it is, I'll give you a hand with it. You know, and I think that invitational tone is very powerful.
I think you hit the hammer on the nail. And it made me think about my first interactions with relationships. And it was with my grandmother. My grandmother taught me how to date. And and all my life I've been really successful at dating.
Come
on, Eric. Have you got your grandmother's number for me?
But my grandmother told me, if you can make her laugh, you can make her listen. So
I like that.
Right? Thing is, I do that same approach when I'm just trying to build regular relationships, because I want you to like me. So if you like me, if I can make you laugh, and if you listen to what I have to say, I'm gonna make you like me. And I don't necessarily need you to have the same opinion that I have. I just need you to listen.
Yeah.
And if you listen, I can prove my work. Now, the difficult thing about that is it's people that we just don't like. And in this profession, we don't talk to the people that we don't like still.
Yeah.
Now, I think about the people that I don't like. And it's not many people that I know that I don't like because they like me back. So one person that I don't like, and I don't know who they is. I don't know this man, but I don't like Donald Trump. When I see him, it makes me cringe. But I often think about, like, what do I need to do if Donald Trump was a teacher at my school? How would I engage with him?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I'd have to have a reason. And my reason is I need to trust him with my babies. Now I call them my babies because they are my babies. Now I need to trust you, and we have to be in a parental relationship. So how can I let some of my good rub off on him? He has to like me. So I'm gonna do some of the stuff that he does, not the crazy stuff like but I'll go out and have a drink with him, and I'll make him laugh. It may be some inappropriate joking, just to get him to listen. And
yeah, I think one thing that we're talking about is like in practice. Often the people we talk to, probably you, as well as the school district administrators, right? That's who's inviting us in to come do a training, and they're worried about these people that aren't gonna buy in, and they haven't bought into other things before, and sometimes I like to think about just implementation in schools in general. And, there's something called implementation fatigue. Every 2 years, we're telling people, throw everything away that you've done. My father was a teacher, sister teacher. I've been in education my whole career. How many times have things come and gone? And so there is this sense of like, this too shall pass. And so in the literature, in the research, they talk about implementation, and that basically most likely you're going to have about 80% of people will get on board with something new. About 10% are kind of going to sit back and say, we'll see if this is going to pass. And then you have about 3 to 5% that they're the ones that that you're talking about, that like they're never going to do it, ever, ever, ever. And in the literature, they actually label these people as laggards, which that's not very restorative. And they say, do not spend your time and energy on laggard conversion. So I give folks a pep talk, like, look, we don't design this for those 3 people. We're gonna but we do need to honor their experience, that one of the reasons they may not be jumping onto this bandwagon is that it's just another bandwagon, and they want to see if you're gonna just keep it up or not.
Yeah.
So let's sit down and make a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, which I know, Michelle, you really work on with school districts a lot too, that you're not just inviting someone in for a training, but we have a plan, because it's really disrespectful to people how often we're changing what we're doing, and it's exhausting, and it makes the next thing that they want to do even harder. And so I think it's just acknowledging and honoring their experience, and that's and the thing I do like about restorative practices in that sense is that often people will make it a personal growth, that they'll go take classes at the IIRP, or they'll do things to come to conferences on their own, that it is about who you become, and it's very fulfilling work. But I look at it too structurally, in addition to the things you're saying. I want to go ahead and give Rick Kelly's question, because Rick has joined us today, and his is I think an equity question. Rick's question is, given that much restorative work can be done in the schools, what ways do you practically address the prior conditions of inequity? And also, how do you strive to engage the voices of parent in the community? So we had actually probably 2 other questions about engaging parents and community too. But the first part of Rick's question about practically addressing prior conditions of inequity also is mirrored. We had some questions also about, also school behavior around inequity and racism and things like that too. So anybody want to take a stab at that?
Talking about inequity and race, it depends on what group of people you're talking to. So like if I'm talking to a group of Black people, that conversation is going to sound different than if I'm talking to white people. In fact, I tried to train white people to find the language to teach other white people. But if it's a mixed group, I think that starting out with our values, and the way I do values is a way that we all can relate to. I try to get us to imagine that we're all co-parenting a baby, that this baby isn't any race at all. And I ask everybody that's participating to name 3 values that you have inside yourself that you want to give to our baby. And we come to realize, and we spend a lot of time on those values. So like, it's not, you're never going to be able to tell me love is one of those values, because I'm going to just be like, I'm just going to say, hey, tell me what kind of love you're talking about. And we all have to agree with that with that love that you're talking about. Yeah. You have to give me and if you say that love, and I want you to talk about the values that you have inside yourself to give to the baby. And if love is one of them, I need you to prove it to me right now. Are you talking about loving everybody? Do you want our baby to just go around just willy-nilly just loving on people? So we go into those values really, really deeply. And we find out that the only thing, as far as race is concerned, the only thing that we're mad at is our outward appearance, because on the inside, we're all the same. And that's the proof. The proof is when we talk about our values, we realize that we're pretty much the same. And it's not across the board. It's people that work in schools. Because people that work in schools, I know for a fact, like Michelle alluded to earlier, they're not coming to this, they're not coming into this profession to make a lot of money. So there must be something else. And that something else is they have a deep love for children. And they want to see children develop and grow. And that's a fact. That's what we all have in common in the school space. Now, what else do we have in common as far as our values go? And how do we use those values to get the things that we need? And that crosses everything, like racial barriers. Like, what do we need in order? And although white people are racist, I don't like to put labels on people. And often when you call white people racist, they think that you're calling them an asshole, but that's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. What we're saying is you get the benefit from a system that I can't benefit from. Yeah. And if you're not active about tearing those walls down, then you become implicit in causing harm. And you may not even be there yet. But if you're not actively trying to tear those walls down, you're just causing harm. Yeah. So when we're talking about race, our values transcends race. Our values crosses the line of race. And then the next thing we have to do is talk about, like, what are our actions? Like, do our actions parallel with our values? Yeah. And if they don't, how can we make them together though? Like, how can I remind you that one of your values is love and loving everybody? And I'm included in that everybody, no matter what the color of my skin is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I have to, and being a Black person on that side of racism, mm-hmm. and there's no sides, but like I'm usually on the hurting side of it, mm-hmm. expressing my feelings. Like when you said that thing, it hurt. Yeah. Hurt my, and I come up with some clever things too. So in fact, Laura and I, with this thing that we did in Napa, where a kid used the N-word, and the parents' reaction was, well, Black kids use the N-word all the time in rap music and that kind of thing. And my response was, and I probably gave 2 examples, like, what do you call your mother at home? Do you call your mother by her first name, or do you call her mom? And of course, they call her, and I would ask, like, what is your mother's name? Laura? Okay. You would, like, and you can't call her Laura with an A or an ER. So, but why? Because that's her name. Mm-hmm. So, and another example I gave, like, to the police officer that was in the room, was like, what do you call your wife? Like, what is your pet name for your wife? And he said, like, honey or something like that. I said, if I didn't know your wife and I walked up to her and I called her honey right in front of you,
how you gonna feel about that? Yeah.
So when you say the N-word, mm-hmm. that's how Black people feel. Like, we've struggled through that word being oppressive. Now, do I use the word? And here's where vulnerability come in at. Yes, all the time. 12 times this morning. Do I want to stop using it? Not really. But just because I do it, that doesn't give you permission to do it. Yeah. Just Just because you call your wife honey, that doesn't give me permission to call her honey because I heard it. And so like finding ways to make these situations make sense. And
Yeah.
And I don't have anything but time on my hand. And I think that I love having those conversations. So part of it is a want to have it. I want to have that conversation. I want to feel uncomfortable in a room and later come out with results. And if you don't want that, it's not going to happen for you.
Right. I one a great quote that I learned, I have to find the poem, but just that being safe, people will talk about, I don't feel safe in that space, but you can be safe, but just not be comfortable, and that's two different things, and kind of getting comfortable with even that idea that, safe and comfortable are two different things. Michelle, how do you think about, Ireland has such a rich heritage of this work, really. That's why so much out there is like from Ireland, right?
Yeah. I guess,
Come at this a little bit different angle.
The peace process in Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
I guess when you initially mentioned inequity, I was thinking about, I guess what immediately sprung to mind, you were talking about practical ways. I was thinking about, I love the examples. They're so arresting, Eric's examples, because they're very relatable, and then it's something that people can hook on. I think that's so practical and helpful. And I'm thinking about, we do a lesson on inequity or equality, and that idea of needs. Restorative practices needs, as we know, it's needs led, and the context. So I guess when I'm thinking about my Irish context, that lesson around needs, we're talking about, like, in this context, thinking about our students maybe with additional educational needs, or our students, like, it's not that everyone gets the same, that sometimes, no, everyone was late, 3 strikes and they're gone. Everyone gets a note in the journal, or everyone, that's only fair. And it's trying to dismantle, well, is it fair? Is it fair, actually? Because this kid walked his sister to school on X, Y, or Z this morning. How is that fair? Because you have to consider the context. So I think one of the lessons we do is around that idea of, just thinking of what people's needs are and what we need to give of our best. I guess that's what I was thinking of initially when the word inequity was spoken, and I'm thinking about my little nephew, right? And again, those practical examples, and he's dyslexic, and he has dyspraxia, and he's dyslexia. And so when he just went from primary school to high school to post-primary, like 12 to 13. But he'd one teacher forever who knew him, knew everything about him, supporting him, and then he had to go into a context where he had 10 teachers. No, I know from a post-primary context that we don't have the same insights. He's going to really struggle with 10 classes, 10 teachers, whatever. And so often, you see it in the work I get to do in prisons as well, where people who might have extra needs suffer and are, continuously punished, and we're not considering the context. But years ago, he would have got smacked for writing with his left hand, or years ago, he would have got sitting on the Duns table for not getting his spellings correct, right? And now our thinking has evolved, and we're thinking, that's so cruel. But the teachers that did it at the time were thinking, no, he has to learn, And so I try and bring that into the conversation when we think about some of our students that might have a lot of, need a lot extra support with regulating, or might have difficulty with communicating in a positive way, So we're going to punish them about it, and they continuously, or are we going to support them? And, he's not getting rewarded because he gets to go on a walk. That's one of his need to regulate. Whereas another student mightn't have that need, the same way another student won't have the need, like my nephew, for extra lessons in this, or to have a reduced, number of teachers he has to go to. We meet people's needs. And I think trying to bring that concept of needs around equity is important. And I could have gone off on a tangent there. I don't know if I addressed.
You were talking about needs, and Eric kind of talked about the racial
inequity,
kind of inequity piece. That's really, but both of these are evident in schools, and probably more than that too. The second follow-up question that Rick kind of talked about was, when he submitted his question, how do you strive to engage the voices of parents and the community? So have you had any successful models? I know Eric and I had some success in Napa with some parents that were just love the process, right? But that was grand scale. Are there also smaller things you've been able to do that are practical for people?
I think that you're gonna, like I mentioned earlier, I think you're gonna make those phone calls anyway. So you might as well make some good ones.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let the parent know that you all right, parents, and I read a lot of stuff on Facebook, and it literally makes me sick because I'm in a lot of groups. One of the groups is an all teacher groups, like I think it's Black Educators Rock, and it doesn't sound like they're rocking. They're constantly criticizing the parents. Like, why didn't the parent do this? Why did the parent do that? Well, this is a parent's job. Um, and my response is usually like, you're the parents. You're the parent 8 hours out of the day. So you should be co-parenting with the like.
Yeah.
It's like a divorce. It should be like a great divorce. Like you live your life over there, and the kids come to me 8 hours of the day, and then you get the rest of the time. And how are we parallel in the way that we're helping this kid grow mentally, physically, and emotionally? And one way we have to do that is like I have baby mamas, and in order for us to co-parent, we have to get along. If we don't get along, and if we're not on the same page,
Yeah.
the child becomes off schedule. So we have to be on the same schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And one, you have to invite those parents out to those things. You would be surprised that once you're in a relationship, once those parents know that you care about them, they'll be at the school more often. That way you can put them to work, put them in circles with other students. And so like the first thing that I do what I used to do every year was call those parents, explain to those parents who I am and what my plan was for their baby. And I would call them whenever a kid did something that touched my heart. You wouldn't believe what your son did today. Your son walked up to this other kid and said, I cry sometimes too. And it just touched my spirit. Now, when a parent hears that, she starts to smile over the phone.
Yeah.
She starts to immediately thinking about how to reward this kid. So when he comes through the door, he gets to go to McDonald's and get the Slurpee or whatever. And now that kid comes back to school the next day. He's like, you called my mom, and then you get a big hug from the kid. Thanks for doing that, because now me and my mom is on a better relationship. She didn't give me a long speech this morning about what I better do once I get to school, because she don't have to, because the other parent is at the school. We're on the same page.
That's great. Have you had some success, Michelle, with some parent outreach?
Yeah, I love that. Eric. We do again, as part of that group I was working with, right, we used to do these quests. So every week we had a quest, and it was around, like, let's say I'd have this thing called the love bomb, right? But it's like the quest is around how to generate positive interactions as opposed to thinking about RP when things go wrong, you know? And so one of the things was like that invitation there, where you're only allowed to make a call. I say to the kids in the yard as well, you can tell me one thing that went wrong if you can tell me two things that went well, you know, in the yard. And it's like, right, you make the phone call home, but the challenge is if you're going to make the call home, which is often necessary, we have to make two good calls in some context too, you know? Yeah. And it's just stretching that. And like that. Then what you said, deep here, and then the mom is like that, Jamie, my Jamie, yeah, you're Jamie. Yeah. And you can hear it in the voice, and it feels so good. It feels so good. And I think it feels good for everybody. Feels good for everybody. Yeah. But I heard this great analogy, right? It was Adam Vaught. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but I got to be on a panel with him last year. He has a great blog. And he talked about DJs have this rule of 6. So when a DJ plays a record, right, they have to have this rule of 6 where they have to play at least 6 times before it gets a little bit familiar to an ear, you know? And he was inviting us to consider the same when we think about parents. So I might work with a school and they're like, no, we shared RP with the parents, like, you know, like it's done. I was like, oh. Yeah. So to continuously kind of have those little, I call them the little connect RP twinkles, you know? And so I have this thing called On a Bright Note. And it's like what you said, Eric, it's usually we try and celebrate an expression of a value. And it's where you try and honor where a kid expressed one of the values, and then you ask them or start a question, what happened? So they'll share the story with you, you know? And those practical little things, nice. Another thing, I have a program called RP at Home for parents, and there's 10 parts to it. And it's again about RP in the car when the kids are killing each other or watching the telly or for the homework or whatever. It's and trying to, the schools that are on that journey, have this as a resource for parents, but nothing has been more powerful than when I've had the great opportunity to work with students, yeah, when students are sharing it with their parents, that has been full, the attendance is huge. When the parents come in, giving them a relational experience, the kids facilitating circles with the parents for connection and belonging, and trying to give them experiences, that has had a big impact. But again, it doesn't happen from nowhere. You have to scaffold that as part of the journey, you know. But those are things that I think about and that I find with parents, yeah.
As a follow-up to that, is what do you do if a parent does not want their child to participate in a restorative process? So say either their child was the one that did harm or their child was harmed. And this has been a tricky one for me, you know, because I do, you know, on the PBIS side of things too, thinking about do you offer the parent, you know, a choice? Oh, we can go the traditional route here for your kid, or we can do this, you know. And I think we've been able to work around it in most situations, you know. Really, sometimes we've done things like that the child already, like, we've already worked it out, you know, and the phone call is really like, you know, you can be so proud of your child. They took responsibility. This is what they want to do to fix it. Like, you know, there's that idea that you approach it almost as a positive phone call because they already did it. I mean, I've also had situations where you bring the kid, the parent, you do a restorative circle, and they decide, you know, one time when we had a high school student pee in the hallway because he thought it was so funny,
That's
you
kind of fun.
know. Sorry?
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And you know, and so it was horrible. The custodian cleaned it up, and so, you know, you call him in and the dad is all over him and absolutely, you know, wants his kid to help, you know, help the custodian after school for 2 weeks. And the kid felt better that he could make it right and bonded with the custodian. And, you know, those are outcomes, you know, that, and I think it's easy for people to get stuck in that outcome. Well, what does that, you know, the consequence look like? But even I've had on the other side, you know, people that don't want their kid to participate with this kid that harmed them.
Sure.
Like an example is a friend of mine who her kids are all biracial, and every school their kids have ever attended, they get comments and teased, and they're sick of it. But the kids themselves are engaging in restorative conversations with their peers around it. And I asked the mom, you know, like, it was just a really great learning experience for me as a school district administrator trying to roll restorative practices out and having, here's a reasonable parent who has a lot of pain. What is that like for you to have your kid, you know, engage in that when you want something different potentially? And you know, the two answers would be, you know, one in my mind, I'm thinking, well, she could come and participate, of course, and we've done that. But what she said to me was really interesting. She said that I have to be okay if she's okay. If Sadie's okay with it, then I'm going to be okay with it. And it was just their relationship that was something that she could do. But I think a lot of people, there's so much pain around that, you know, that it's hard and they don't trust the school, you know. And so what have you found successful when you have a parent that doesn't want their kid to participate either one side, the other, or whatever?
I've learned it. So like, I've learned not to be reactionary, like responding to, like putting those fires out before they start. Like how you don't put a fire out before it starts, but you do take away the matches, like get rid of all of the stuff. Thing is, I learned about this from the least restorative person in our school, who was the principal, who told me on the first day that she is the queen of suspensions. Yeah. So I had to manipulate a relationship with her. I know people don't like the word manipulation, but that's a bigger conversation.
You found you had a lot in common.
Yeah. But once she became restorative, once we became friends, she became restorative. And after the first year, every student, and this is kind of unique because it's a smaller school with about 300 kids. So we were able to do that. So as the kids are enrolling in school, Ms. Steele would have a circle with every single parent. And these kids are coming to this continuation school because they did something. So what Bastille would do is throw away their rap sheet in front of them. It's like, that doesn't matter. We're starting from the beginning. So we're establishing trust and a commonality that she loves your kids the same way you do. And we're just partners together. So like, this is before anything ever happens.
Okay.
And if you need anything, you can always call us, no matter what it is, because restorative justice doesn't stop in the school. So like, when we're talking about finding out what the needs are, if there's a kid that's hungry, we have to figure that thing out. That family cannot be hungry. So once that energy gets into the community, I've never had a problem with a parent not wanting their kids to be involved in the process because they're already in a relationship with me and Ms. Steele. So we've already established trust. We don't have to do that all over again. We do that at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah, same. I think you build goodwill and good times, around restorative practice, not when, often we want zero tolerance, so it's our kid, and then we want compassion and understanding, But I think to share that restorative approach when all is well is very important. But also, let's say you're in a situation and you build that capacity. So let's say the work I do with schools, there's huge foundational work done to build the capacity for those higher kind of incidences of harm, maybe. But also sometimes that luxury isn't there. And I think with preparation, so I think it's just invitational, and what I think is trying to even build a relationship through that preparation. Someone has to pay, someone is going to pay, but really they want their grandchild to be happy and well, and that idea of justice, again, being reminded of what you guys were saying and Eric's definition. For me, when I heard the definition about justice defined in terms of getting well as opposed to getting even, how will we be happy and well where our kids are back in school and they feel good, and that's the only intention. So I guess as a something practical, what I find is if I can share and really iterate the intention and just invite, and let's just have a chat, will we, and explore it, and then see where we go. And maybe we go together, maybe we don't, and that's okay. But I think, of course, building the goodwill and good times, I think that relationship, like everything else, is there'd be nothing more powerful than that,
And understanding that you might not be the perfect person to build a relationship with this particular person. So you probably have to find a skill to where you can find a person that can do that. And usually coaches never fail.
Coaches,
my experience is coaches are usually the school's favorite teachers. And there's
a reason, like the sports coaches.
Yeah, and there's a reason. The reason is they're selfish. They want to win, so they protect their team. And what they're doing is actually really restorative. They make sure that the guys don't get in trouble during the summertime. So they'll get them summer jobs, find things for them to do. Yeah. They'll go and talk to the parents. They'll talk to the teachers, make sure their grades are together because they want to win the football game. Yeah. So that's why I always say, find your why. Once you find your why, like, why do I need to be in this relationship? And my why is simple. I am probably the most popular adult amongst young people in Oakland. There's nowhere I can go in Oakland without and when I say young person, I mean 25. Say, hey man, you changed my life. And you know what? They call me by my first name because we're in a parallel relationship.
Yeah.
And they give me big hugs. And my friends think that it's really weird. In fact, my mom visited me in Oakland, and we took a walk, and all of these young people were like, Eric, and that's your mom. My mom was like, wow, you're really, really popular. It's too bad it's just kids.
Oh.
I'm like, that's a great thing. They keep me young.
Kids and dates, Eric.
This is
Well, it's the same concept without the romantic part. It's like,
sure.
Like, it's like, what do you do when you really want to be in relationships with somebody? If you really want to be in a relationship with somebody, you find out what they like and you become that. And we're all guilty of it. If for example, if I like a woman enough and she goes to church, suddenly I find myself in church. I don't like church, for the record.
No.
But
Yeah.
I would do things that I normally wouldn't do. I don't like hiking, but
Yeah.
if I'm interested in somebody and they're hiking, I guess I'm hiking.
You're making me think about Eric. You know, I love Brené Brown, right? She has this definition. She juxtaposes the idea of fitting in and belonging, you know. And when you fit in, obviously you have to be the same as everyone else. And when you belong, you can just be yourself. You don't hustle for it, you know. And so I'm just, I guess what you're talking about, trying to hotwire a connection with somebody, you know. But in authentic, true relationship, we would show up as ourselves, would we not? Or what are you thinking? Just curious.
I'm still showing up as myself. It's just in a place where I normally wouldn't be. So I'm still myself. But honestly, I'm lazy, you know. And if it wasn't for the fact that women appreciate fresh breath, I probably would never brush my teeth. So it's a win-win.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't know I'd come and get like relationship tips here. Yeah.
So I mean, you know, before we get on to our, one of our participants here suggested we have a restorative dating app.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up, I'm wondering about, are there any questions that I missed? I kind of grouped them. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying to reel it back in.
Sorry, Laura.
Oh, it's good. Anything that you get asked a lot that I didn't bring up, that I didn't ask?
Oh yeah, all the time. This one about time. There's no time.
Oh right,
no time.
There's not enough time. Thank you.
Right.
That was on here too. Okay, let's hear what do you say, Michelle?
Oh look, loads of different things, but I guess a couple of things. One of the things that I like to say a lot around that is like a way of thinking doesn't take more or less time. Sometimes processes can take time, and maybe you like to respond to them. But like if I'm thinking, how dare he speak to me like that in my maths class? Or I'm thinking, I wonder what's going on with that showing up, you know, or there's 10 ways you can ask someone to pick up a wrapper. Pick that up now. Or would you mind giving us a hand and picking that up, good man? Or whatever. So that's not more or less time. So I guess what I'm thinking about is the all day, everyday stuff, which is, I think, what's really important. And then, of course, I love that, you know, that book, Nancy Riesenstein, I think I've said her name incorrectly, but she is that book, The Circle and the Square, where we're trying to do circles and buildings and things that are square. So we do what we can. But I think when we're thinking relationally, we maintain the empathic bond, which is a great culture for connection, regardless of whether we have a physical half an hour or not, you know? What do you guys say?
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I think that the same with like if you do the work at the beginning, it takes less time. You're gonna do the work, you're gonna take the time.
Yeah.
But if you do it at the beginning, it's less time. And I'll give you an example. Like my first day, just coming from personal experiences, when I see the Latino boys standing on one side and the black boys standing on the other side at lunchtime, nothing is happening. But if something does happen, I don't want it to be about race. So what I did was I called all of the parents and asked them to bring some food. So we had a potluck and we got in circle and we talked about race. And because of that conversation, those boys became family members of people that weren't in the same race as them, because his mom smiled at her son. It's like, and they found the commonalities. And when we find the commonalities, we realize the reason why we make these assumptions is because we don't have the conversation. The assumptions just pull us further and further back.
Yeah.
And where do we get these assumptions from? We get these assumptions from television and people that we just hear. We hear the truth when we intentionally have the conversation. So like having the intentional conversation at the front end, so we won't have to take the time throughout the school year, not even at the back end, throughout the school year, because when you call that parent, you're asking that parent to come in for a parental thing. So
yeah.
And when that parent comes in at the end of that conversation, and your kid has to go home with you for 3 days.
Yeah.
So now that parent doesn't trust you anymore, and you just wasted her time. You could have said this on the phone. So we do it at the front end, and we become partners with the parents. so we don't have to do it at the back end. We didn't have any suspensions. And somebody asked me, did y'all just stop suspending, or did the behavior change? Good question. And my answer is the behavior changed. The adults absolutely have changed their behavior.
That's right. That's right. You know, we had the same in Napa Valley Unified, where we about 10 years implemented PBIS and restorative practices, and we reduced suspensions by 75%, expulsions by 99%. And this was in the first like 3 years, actually. And we sustained it, which is really unusual. As we were talking about implementation fatigue, it's very unusual for an entire school district of 30 schools and 18,000 students to not just keep changing initiatives, but to stick with it. And as a result, we were at the 99th percentile for school climate in the state of California. So kids, I feel safe at my school. One of the most telling questions on those is, my teacher likes me.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, and someone notices if I'm there, you know? And I think one of the things I just watched happen with my eyes was, I used to walk into the office of a principal at usually middle and high schools, and there'd be a row of boys on that bench, you know, waiting to be seen. And they're, you know, listening in on conversations of the secretaries and watching medical emergencies and talking to each other and making friends of all the people misbehaving. And I, you know, I would come in and there'd be a row of kids. And as we, you know, within about a year, or, you know, like slowly, I didn't notice until maybe it was a year or two in. And I walked in and I saw there's 2 kids. And then one other thing I saw was that I'm like, okay, this is really interesting. You know, they'd been doing a lot of like just being clear of expectations and teaching them to the kids. I mean, a lot of the PBIS staff. And then what they did that was really interesting is, every time there was a discipline thing, and I'd be sitting and talking, say, to the assistant principal about how things were going. I was kind of a coach. The principal would poke his head in and say, hey, I have John in here, and this, and this happened. I'm thinking about this. What do you think? It was a new routine that they set up to check in with each other, to get another perspective, different idea. And it was just an extra layer, I think, on their discipline response practices that also helped think of new ways to approach it, and to involve, maybe that person had a different relationship with the kid, or they knew something different about that. And so we also, that whole idea of there's not enough time, it's true. There's not enough time if you have a system that just reacts. You don't. And that's all you can do is like suspend. But even if you look at statistically, like a typical office referral, so in the US, when a kid gets in trouble, people send them away. They leave the classroom. That's not true in a lot of other countries that I work with people in other countries, and it's shameful to send a kid out of class because you're telling people you can't handle it. That can take like 30 minutes to 90 minutes. If you simply change the system so that someone comes to the door of the classroom and invites the student into the hall, does a little restorative chat, I mean, that whole deal could be like less than 5, really, if the teacher is calm and wants the kid back and things like that. The other piece is that I actually have been working on with people as I'm training, using Michelle's TED Talk. She talks about calm as a superpower. And I love how you come at it, Michelle, from such a empathetic way to teachers, but just letting them know it's okay if you're not ready to talk to a student. If you're still upset about something, then you're not going to be able to be the restorative person you want to be. And so it's okay to say, hey, can we talk at break? Can we talk at lunch? Can we talk after school? But I'm thinking more from a structural point of view, as a school community, making an agreement that there will be a conversation. There's no escape hatch from relationship. There's no eject button for students. Like, we do always bring them back restoratively when there's been something. But that conversation can be really fast too. So there's just some structural things that if you do preventative work, set up structures, the line isn't as long out the principal's door, you can have meaningful restorative processes then. And then try to build a system of responding to typical classroom behavior restoratively by sending support to the room rather than sending kids away. Those are just like practical strategies that save a lot of time.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, putting out the fire. If you put out the fire is gone. What we do is we try to contain the smoke so everybody else that we care about is not affected by the smoke. So we're not concerned about the fire. And that takes a lot of time. So imagine working at the fire department and you're not putting the fire out. You're just trying to maintain the smoke and keep it in one area. That will take a lot of time.
Yeah.
Opposed to just putting out the fire. And what I'm thinking about is like in the movie Circles, there's a scene where this baby, she comes out of the classroom, she's angry, she wants to fight. She says that she was mad at the young lady because the young lady wanted to turn the air conditioner on. Now, as an adult, I know that that's not the reason why you're angry. So because we're in a relationship, I ask her, like, what is the real reason? And she immediately starts to cry. And now I know something is wrong. And she talks about her brother passing away. And she hasn't dealt with that. So now we have to deal with that. Like, once we deal with that, we don't have to deal with this smoke and her wanting to fight this girl is the smoke. The fire is this baby has unaddressed harm. So let's deal with that. And then we won't have to worry about the smoke anymore because the fire's out.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And as adults, we know what the fire is, but we still entertain that smoke. I had a teacher call herself the gum police because after every classroom, she would look under the desk to see who was putting gum underneath the desk. The gum is the smoke. And why are you spending so much time on that?
Yeah. So you said something interesting, Eric, about how what I heard, we're talking about time and saving time. When you have a relationship built on trust with a student, you get to the why of the behavior really fast.
Yeah.
And now we can actually solve it instead of just, putting out of whatever the smoke, that kind of thing. And that's more efficient. It just is,
Yeah.
What about you, Michelle? Any time saving tips?
I mean, yeah, it's like what you said, the proactive stuff. I mean, it's kind of, I think even when I have this little thing, my nephew, right? He's 7 and his name is Alfie. And we have this little thing and I say, you are seen with, and he says love. And I say love. You're seen with love. And he knows he's seen with love. And I know he's seen with love. So the reservoir we have there, and when things hit the fan or blah, 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 we have that reservoir where he knows and I know. So we can go places or navigate things or de-escalate things a lot differently than maybe some other people in relationship with my little Alfie, And it's kind of what I heard Giselle say so often, is that when we know we're seen with love, and I think that doesn't happen. That happens, the little twinkles, the little moments that we're cultivating all the time on purpose and just because of how we are in relationship, and I think that's probably the biggest time. That's where I try and invest my time and energy. And I think it offers a lot of dividends when we have that reservoir to call upon, And so I don't always get it right, that's for sure. And usually when I'm not able to regulate myself and I'm struggling and I'm like, what do I need? I'm trying to be restorative with myself. I think that's also helpful to have that little awareness for, because otherwise I'm going into crazy town, like I do in my TED talk as well. Because like I'm struggling, So if I'm trying to co-regulate and to, that I'm mindful of where I'm at as well, taking my breaks, resting myself, you know what I mean? All those things I think are helpful for time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that how you talk about that in the story in your TED talk about how you come the next day back to the student. And there was a question about like, how long is too long? Like, do I have to do it right away? What if I'm not ready, or how long before bringing people together, and I like how it's okay. It's okay to wait and be calm and be ready, I think that's really
Bruce Perry does a
honoring.
lovely bit about that, the 3 R's, that the regulate, relate, and reason. We always go for the reason. And if we're not regulated and there isn't that little relationship that perhaps we're trying to get there too quickly, I like his stuff as well.
But in schools, man, we gotta go fast. We gotta solve this problem. And it does take time though. It can, and that's difficult. That's difficult to take time for these. Eric, were there any questions that you get asked that we didn't bring up as we're kind of wrapping up now? But I want to make sure Anything that's come up that we
Right
didn't,
now, I'm sure I'm going to think of a tons
you're
of
going to
things.
be like, man. Do you want to share how people can reach you after this? Maybe you both can kind of share if people have follow-up questions or they want to see your work, where they can find you.
Yeah, I would love to, but I have assistants that know that information. In fact, when I'm
Oh, go on and show off, Eric. Now
So
let's
Eric,
show off.
there's a documentary made of you called Circles.
yeah,
So people
so
can look that up, and
that's
that's on
on
Amazon.
it's on Amazon
Yeah.
and the other few streaming and we have a website. I don't know the name. I don't know what it's for, but I have someone here that can help.
Okay, we'll get that. And then Michelle, how do
Minders,
we?
if you have a look at my website there, connectorp.ie, look at my schools page. That's my favorite because that's obviously all the schools I get to work with, sharing their wisdom and their expertise. That's actually the best page. But
The
if
My
you check
Schools
out
page. Okay.
our schools page, and you'll just hear from practitioners, which is probably the most interesting, but that's
Yeah.
where you'll see it.
And
Yeah,
you have videos
connectorp.ie.
on YouTube and
YouTube,
Vimeo.
yeah. And my
There's
TEDx
videos
is on my website, so you'll have segues into YouTube from there,
from there. And
Yeah.
Eric, do you have your info?
Yeah. Well, this is nearly
Hi.
what is your
Hi.
I'm program development, so I just support with with the trainings and all the circles that we do at Talking Peace.
so
So it's
if you may-
talkingpeace.org. Is that you guys?
It's www.talking-peace.org.
Okay.
And then
put it in the chat.
yeah, I can put that in the chat. And then we are also on social media. So I'll put that information in the chat as well.
Awesome. Okay, great. And then I can be found, of course, here, lauramooiman.com. And then I have a webpage too with training. And then I have a YouTube channel, just my name, Laura Mooiman. And it's a lot of just tips and tricks of how to work in schools, some PBIS stuff, some restorative practices stuff. I have free scripts people can download on my website and online courses, as does Michelle. And then Eric, you do a lot of online courses too, like webinars and things. So everybody, we all can help reach people even when we can't be in person. Well, thank you everyone for participating today. This was just so fun.
I had a great time. Thanks
Yeah,
so much.
that's
really
how it
enjoyed
should be.
Yeah,
Good. Well,
yeah,
we'll have to do more
yeah.
of these get-togethers. And for Eric and Michelle, if you ever need anything from me, just
Thank
anytime,
you.
reach
Thank you.
out.
Back at you both.
And if I need a place to stay, I'll, in Ireland.
I have a spare room. I do. Leafy was here earlier on. I said that to her once and she took me up in the offer. She gave me for a week.
And Eric, it's so good to see your face again. It's been too long. And so just love following both of your work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
This recording will get posted on the conference, and then eventually it'll get released on YouTube in general for just other people to be able to learn.
Bye, Susan, Rick, and Linda. See you later. Bye. See you, Eric. Lovely to meet you. Thanks for making us laugh. Thanks, Laura. You're so good for organizing it.
Oh, you're welcome. I had a
Have
great
a good
time.
evening. Bye, everybody.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.